You're listening to The Manning Report with your host, James David Manning, the news behind the headlines.
I want to talk to you today. Today is the 28th of August, the year 2019, and we just, in the Trust in the Lord segment, at least looked in some celebrative way at the one-year anniversary of the 28th of August 2018 of an event that took place in Staybridge Hotel, and all of the teachings that have derived from the ATLAH pulpit of power over the past year. But I want to go even further back using a similar date of the 28th of August 1963, when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stood there on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial with a crowd of 250,000 people and gave that speech that had been given many times previously, but has become one of the more famous speeches in the history of time, is that I have a dream. And it was the height of the civil rights movement. It was a time when the slavery had ended in 1865, and there had been the Reconstruction period, and then Jim Crow set in, the Ku Klux Klan arose, and Jim Crow became a very much part of the way life was treated, or at the time Negroes or coloreds, as they were called, were treated. But Dr. King had started a march. He graduated from Crozer University and Boston University with a PhD and theology. His father had been a preacher. His grandfather had been a preacher. They had been Baptist preachers all their lives. And he, as a young preacher, had been chosen by the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to lead the movement of civil rights. And at the time, it was a major part of the American psyche, because at that time, really the Negro and the colored person did not have full rights to vote under the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. It was an interesting time. I was in high school when that march took place on August 28th, 1963. Well, today is August 28th, the year 2020. We're 57 years past that historic day there in Washington, D.C. And I thought, and I would give some comments, if you will, about where we've come over the past 57 years and what that means. And I find myself now a preacher myself. I was ordained a Baptist preacher in the Dr. King tradition. I studied not at Crozer, but I studied at Union Theological Seminary, where I matriculated and graduated with a master's in divinity, and worked very closely with members of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the larger National Baptist Convention groups, and now I find myself working here in the community, the landmark, the flagship community of the Negro people, as they were called during that time, colored, as they're called during that time. I think in 1984, Jesse Jackson changed the name from Negro and colored to African American, and they've been identified as that as such. But historically, and to be true to history, we're going to talk Negro and colored as they were, and then we'll evolve through the period of Black and then Afro-American, et cetera, and whatever it is that they want to call themselves now. They've gone back to Black with Black Lives Matter. But I wanted to give some observation on these two anniversaries, the anniversary that God has allowed to happen with the ATLAH World Missionary Church on the 28th of August, and all the teachings that has been generated as a result of that, and to take a look at and just to ask a question. One of the presidential candidates said in the presidential debate some time ago, are we better off now than we were in 1963? Now, generally, globally, at least nationally, the world is a better place in terms of it's not spiritual. Let's talk not spiritually. But in many ways, life today can be somewhat easier and therefore somewhat better than it was 57 years ago. That there's more access. There's more access to health care. There's more access to longer lives now. There's more access to entertainment now. There's more access to greater incomes now than they were 57 years ago. There are a large number of things that can be touted perhaps as better than 57 years ago when Dr. King marched or during that period of the civil rights. But spiritually, are we better? And more specifically, since that march on the 28th of August was about Negro and colored people, are they better off today than they were when Dr. King marched and said, gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech? Are the Negro colored people better off now? Well, we know they've changed their name from colored and Negro to African American. Is that a better designation? Well, we'll have to see. Does that better identify? Well, it gives them a sort of a homeland perspective over just the word Negro, which means either black or the word colored, which at the time, the black people were the only colored people in America. There were not a lot of other colored people like Muslims. There were very few of them in America, or even Hispanics and Spanish colored people. Black people were the only colored people in America for a large number of years. It was after that period that a lot more colored people came to America. But my observation is I was a high school student when that march took place. I later graduated a year or so later. And here I am today, 57 years later, looking at the importance of that march. A lot of people will say because of the march of Dr. King, because of that day, and "I Have a Dream," his dream was that at the time that there would be full integration of the races, that that the men would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, was the theme during those years. For some, not for everybody. A whole lot of people didn't believe Dr. King, didn't want to believe that nonviolent stuff, to be sure, but we're not talking about them today. We're talking about Dr. King and the anniversary of the Civil Rights March on the 28th of August. And people came from all over America. They came on buses, they came on mule and wagon, they came by way of cars, they hitchhiked. They came to Washington to hear that. And nobody knew that the speech, "I Have a Dream," would become so famous on that day. It is reported that Dr. King had written that speech many moons earlier. And Mahalia Jackson, one of the great psalmists of the gospel music of the church, saw that Dr. King's speech it was going okay, the things he was saying, but she knew that Dr. King could stir that crowd a whole lot more powerful than he was stirring. She kept saying, "Martin," that's what she called him. But she was much older than him, and he was a young man. She kept, "Martin," she was saying from the third or fourth row back there. "Martin," she said. "Martin, tell him about the dream, Martin. Tell him about the dream. Martin, tell him about the dream." So he switched gears and went into that dream speech that he had given in several churches years earlier. And from there, it's all history. It's a powerful speech. Perhaps Dr. King and Abraham Lincoln have given two of the most powerful speeches in American history ever. The Gettysburg Address at that time had been the most powerful ever. And then, of course, "I Have a Dream" has now come in number 2 or maybe even number 1. Of course, John Kennedy's speech, "Ask not what your nation can country do for you, but ask what you can do for your country," it's probably come in number 3. My observations are perhaps maybe a tad biased, and I'll admit that. But I think in a general perspective, and when all things are concluded, the African American state, spiritually, to be sure, is worse than the Negro and colored state. That the Negroes, though Jim Crow was a part of the political way of dealing with the Negroes, Jim Crow is simply a name that's given to identify that the separation of the races, that there were colored water fountains and there were white water fountains. There was places where colored could not go and where whites only could go. And that's how America functioned. I mean, the churches, the Presbyterian, the Baptists, the Southern Baptists, everybody just saw that as normal. They saw that as normal for nearly 100 years, that black people and white people were not equal. And they could not go to the same restaurants. Moreover, many people that believed that black people were diseased or that they were unclean, and they didn't want to eat in the same restaurants as did white people didn't want to eat in the same restaurants. And so the fight was for a sense of equality. And integration was a big word. Everybody knew it, everybody could spell it. Segregation was a part of what George Wallace and a lot of the Dixiecrats were promoting at the time. I grew up through all of that. And I came to New York in 1965, 2 years after that great speech. Spiritually, how are we doing? Well, let's see. One may argue that the pinnacle of the results of Dr. King's march would be the advent of Barack Hussein Obama becoming president of the United States of America. That, when a black man, though Obama's not black, but for historical purposes, I'll allow that to be said at this time, for a black man to become president, should have meant that the Negro, colored, and now African American had arrived, that there was full equality, and symbolically that was the offering that the white or the Japheth man offered to end segregation, to end Jim Crow. Put a black man in the White House, there's no more powerful person, there's no more higher office, there's no more greater recognition of a race than the man in the White House. But the question, whether I'm biased or not, to you is that did the advent or the putting of Barack Hussein Obama in the White House make black people, colored people, African American people equal? Did it remove racism? Did it bring forth brotherly love? Did it colorblind all of us where we don't see color anymore? Did it do it? Carl Stokes became the first black mayor of Cleveland, Ohio. Y'all remember that? Cayuga County. Shirley Chisholm, congressman from Brooklyn, New York, fiery. Barbara Jordan, we'll never forget Barbara Jordan sitting in on the Nixon impeachment as Congresswoman Barbara Jordan from Texas, very powerful, eloquent woman. There have been any number of people there. And then, of course, we've had the anti-nonviolent movement. We've had Malcolm X. We've had the Nation of Islam Muslim led by Elijah Muhammad. And then there's Stokely Carmichael and Rap Brown. There's been the more violent groups, the Black Panthers, Huey Newton, Bobby Seale. There's Angela Davis, Maya Angelou. Where are we today? Is there equality? I'll let you answer that. Moreover, what has the movement shifted to? What is the movement about today? Is what we see happening now the realization of Dr. King's dream? Are we really now full-fledged constitutional colorblind citizens, or are we what? And what is are we somewhere in between, or not much better off than we were years ago? And whatever advancements we may be touting could not necessarily be advancements because of Dr. King's dream. It's just that America itself has economically grown and become an economic world power. And so therefore, rather than having people on the plantation picking cotton, they've got cotton picking machines. Like they got robots now in Detroit and Pontiac, Michigan, making automobiles, where they used to have people that migrated from Mississippi making automobiles in Pontiac, Michigan. So the question looms large. And, were Dr. King alive today, he'd probably be somewhere around 97, 98 years old. And don't hold me to that date, I could be wrong on those numbers, but he'd be somewhere in that category of years. Were he not assassinated, would we have evolved, would he have had a major impact on the development of the Negro into the African American? Well, the answer to that question is this. Jesse Jackson, who was a lieutenant of Dr. King in that regard, is the one who named colored Negro people African Americans. So potentially we would not be called African Americans if Dr. King was still alive and Jesse Jackson had not been given the spotlight. If Jesse Jackson had not been given the mantle, then he would not have had the national authority and the impact and influence to be able to put that name out there, African American. So when we look at where we are right now, we could probably extract African Americans and we would not be known as that. If Dr. King was yet alive, we still might be known as Negro or colored. However, there's another issue going on with respect to if Dr. King was yet alive. We know that just before his death, that he was not the most influential Negro, if you will, in America. While he was heralded by a lot of Japheth people, that is white people, but there were a number of groups such as the Nation of Islam, Muslims, and Malcolm X and Stokely Carmichael, who marched with Dr. King but said, I ain't letting nobody slap me. I ain't turning no cheek to nobody. You hit me, I'm hitting back. And Stokely and Rap Brown went back and forth with Dr. King while they marched with him. They didn't believe his philosophy. And ultimately, would they have taken over? Where would we be? I have to tell you as well is that though it appears now that Dr. King was powerful in that, but the church, the Baptist church of which he had come out of, was not fully supportive. The National Baptist Convention that was led by Dr. Joseph Harrison Jackson at the time, Dr. King's heyday, did not accept Dr. King's civil rights. He thought it was going to cause white backlash. He thought it was unsettling. He thought it was too militant, even though it was a nonviolent movement. The National Baptist Convention, USA Incorporated, which is the largest group of black Baptists, thought that Dr. King's marching and protesting was upsetting a lot of white people and that it was not good for the church. And so the National Baptist Convention did not give itself. You'll notice that in the footage, if you read some of the history that Jim Garrow has written about Dr. King and other biographers of Dr. King, that the black church was not supportive of Dr. King. Some people were, obviously, but not the leadership of the black church, and Dr. Joseph Harrison Jackson in particular. When Dr. King came to Chicago before the Dream speech, they were holding the Baptist Ministers Conference at, I think it was Mount Olivet Baptist Church there. Clay Evans was the pastor. And Dr. King came to the Baptist Ministers Conference there with Clay Evans in the Clay Evans Church, and they wouldn't let him speak. In fact, they put him out. They believed he was a rabble-rouser, troublemaker, upstart. So as quietly as it's kept, the black church was not supportive of Dr. King, though he was supported by a lot of Jewish people, supported by a lot of Japheth people, and then of course there were just the run-of-the-mill non-leadership black people. So there was a lot of controversy. There was a very tumultuous time, Dr. King's march. However, he survived it and rose above everybody thinking about it. Who comes anywhere close to him in terms of recognition would have been Malcolm X. Both of them were assassinated, as you very well know. Malcolm was assassinated because he got involved in Elijah Muhammad's business in terms of talking about Muhammad and having children out of wedlock. I don't know why Malcolm did that to this very day. I don't know why Malcolm did that. You know, I'm not saying it was right what Elijah Muhammad did. I'm not saying that, but it didn't make it right for for Malcolm X to use that as a wedge to try to set up his own African movement. With Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad killed him. I'm not sure who it was that killed Martin. But I can say this, that Martin did not have the power of the church behind him. And a lot of other people who understood the Jim Crow civil rights movement wasn't behind him. But the thing I want to say to you today, and I've been kind of rambling on, is that we're not in a better situation now. In fact, there's been a reversal of ethics and morals, and God has privileged me to live through those times to see the efficacy of both of them. We're far worse today than we were. The big movement now is not civil rights or civil riots for the Jim Crow, the diaspora, Negro, and colored person. The big movement now by the one person that you would have thought that would have been the mantle and probably the flagship of what Dr. King had done, Barack Hussein Obama fought for gay rights, is what he fought for. He didn't fight for the rights of children to be able to play on the same playground. Obama fought for gay rights and continued to fight for anti-God, anti-Bible, LGBTQ. That's what he fought for. That's who he is, and that's what he loves. I mean, he loves that. And that's the big movement now, to turn men who are men into women and turn women into men. It's ugly. And that's what the so-called product of Dr. King's civil rights legislation, constitutional appeal has yielded. Barack Obama, who has brought us gay rights. It's a long way from where we were in 1963. But notwithstanding Barack Hussein Obama, there has been a movement that civil rights, I think, has done that has changed the morals and the ethics of who we are from a time when we were morally and socially and religiously independent people. Though we lived in various neighborhoods across the track, could not drink from the same water fountain, there was a morality and a spirituality and an ethics about who we were. And I can testify that is far stronger that we were better off before the King marched. We were better off before he said, I have a dream. We were better off before the legislation of 1964 with Adam Clayton Powell Jr. and Lyndon Johnson and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and all the legislation that was passed. We were better off. Now, to be sure, it is good that those legislative acts have taken place. It is good that the voting rights have been extended. It's good that we have a right to vote, but we lost something in the process of gaining that. We lost a sense of morality, ethics, and spirituality and independence that it appears that we cannot regain. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Marcus Garvey, who in many ways was a segregationist and a separatist, Marcus Garvey was, and I don't mean that in an ugly way, that he had somehow or another an aversion or a hatred for white people, but in the 1920s, when he started the Negro Improvement Movement, you know, the segregation was at its heyday 35 years before Dr. King marches on Washington, and we're deeply entrenched in America in segregation. And Marcus Garvey here in New York, Jamaican born, began to teach self-reliance, own your own business, own your own home, you know, men take care of their children, keep your communities clean, live an upright, upstanding life, use the money within the community. He taught those principles, and he developed a lot of businesses and gained global power here in Harlem. Marcus Garvey did. A sense of great independence, not asking the white man for anything. Marcus Garvey did. In fact, the movement became so powerful that the people saw in politics that he was becoming so powerful, they had to stop Marcus Garvey. So they infiltrated his nation, his movement, with people that sold him out and finally found a way to criminalize him. And he was hauled into court, all his money and property taken from him by the courts, spent some time in jail, and then sent him back to Jamaica and banned him from ever setting foot in America again. You know, I have a similar movement as Marcus Garvey. You may have seen some similarity in the things I've said, because it's only natural that men would be business owners in their own community. It's only natural before God that men would be leaders in their homes. It's only natural that men would do that. But I also have to be very careful. And I look very carefully because we've received a lot of people. We've gotten rid of a lot of them. That the devil doesn't put somebody in here to sell us out. It sold Marcus Garvey. Sold him out. But it's only natural. And so I'm here in Harlem, as was Marcus Garvey. But those were days when Harlem was Harlem. Those were days when there was a sense of independence. You can call me black or Negro or colored or whatever you want to call me, but I got my own house, I got my own car, I run my own business, I don't have to bootleg you. That was a historic time. We've lost all of that. Now, Obama has sent all these gay people up here to Harlem, and they've taken over everything in Harlem. They bought up the houses and pushed the poor people out, and it's crazy. And they bought up the churches. These gay people have bulldozed churches under Obama. You would not believe how much we've lost since Dr. King. If you go back and look at Booker T. Washington, for instance, another one of my heroes, started school, Tuskegee down there in Alabama, educating people, teaching them how to work in an industrial way, and teaching them also, how to work in science and chemistry and mathematics and physics, while at the same time how to plow a mule, how to chop a cotton, how to do a very powerful in a movement of independence. Teaching independence in ways in which he corresponded with Marcus Garvey. And these movements, Dr. King usurped. Dr. King usurped them. Said, we want civil rights. We want equal opportunities. I don't know if it has been achieved. I don't know if it's been achieved. In fact, if you ask me, I look at men today and I wonder, because I don't see a man anymore, especially when I look at the Hamite brother. I don't see a man anymore. I don't see a man. And you think about it for just a second. If you look at what Marcus Garvey did in Harlem, businesses, cleaners, restaurants, food service places, small businesses, Harlem belonged to the economics. The churches were jam-packed. Marcus Garvey. Obama has sent gay people up here. And Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and all that crowd have sent gay people and have taken away the cojones of the Hamite brother and given him a vagina and a welfare check and a food stamp booklet and a food stamp card. It's what Obama has done. And to some degree, what Dr. King has done. Very disheartening. Very disheartening. So nobody even talk about Dr. King anymore. But they do talk about him. They want to try to run him down. So I think that, and then we don't get true history. David Garrow, probably the most proficient biographer of Dr. King, has now written some very ugly things about Dr. King. Talking about he's involved in gang rape and all kinds of things of that nature. It's scurrilous what he's done. Somebody ought to slap the pink off David Garrow's face. At any rate, we're not better off 57 years. I think the most destructive thing that has ever happened, notwithstanding all the other persons that have come along, is Barack Hussein Obama, who has turned the black man gay, took away his cojones and gave him a vagina, took away the black woman's vagina and gave her some whatever he's given to her. And that's what the epitome. And now you got Black Lives Matter. You got Al Sharpton. I'm gonna tell you something. Malcolm X would not march with Al Sharpton. Dr. King wouldn't march with Al Sharpton. So I'm here in Harlem to call for a reversal go back to a time when we will be independent and not dependent. When you hear me come, you see me show up and you hear what I say. And even when I talk about the shortcomings and failures of the black people, the Hamite brother, I'm not saying it because I'm angry. I'm trying to wake him up to the truth about himself. You see me coming, try to understand that. I don't hate Dr. King, but look at what Obama has done. I mean, he's turned loose perversion and anti-God. We're living in a world now because of Obama where people have lost faith in the Bible. He's even got the Catholics and Jews acting crazy. And who can see it? Who can understand it? You know, if you were born in captivity, I see a lot of these animal shows of a lion born in captivity. He doesn't know how to hunt. You put him in the wild, he don't know how to hunt. He's born in a cage. His mama gave birth to him in a cage. He's living in a cage. He's living in the zoo. He's been living 20 years in the zoo. Put him in the wild. Put him out there in the wilds of Africa. He wouldn't survive out there. And I see black men today. They've been born in captivity. They don't know. They look at me. They think I'm crazy as hell. Especially the younger ones. They sure enough think I'm crazy as hell. They want to kill me. They hate me. The young black men. They love Obama. They love somebody who's taking away their cojones and giving them a vagina. They hate the hell out of me. They don't know how to hunt. They're born in captivity. I wasn't born in captivity. I was born in the wild. I was born before Dr. King. I was born before the Civil Rights March. I was born before the riots. I was born before that. I was born when every man stood on his own feet, every tub stood on his own bottom. I was born when men took care of their children no matter what. I was born in the wild. I wasn't born on food stamps. I wasn't born living in city developments. I wasn't born there. I was born in the wild. Pray for me. Pray for me. Pray for me. You might be able to hear what I'm saying. But we ain't going to take this. No, Obama will not succeed, and neither will Al Sharpton. I'm the Lord's servant. I'm here on behalf of the work of Almighty God. I'm going to keep on working. Going to make Marcus Garvey proud. That's right. Going to make Malcolm proud. That's right. Going to make Booker T. Washington. Going to make them all proud of our dependence, that we are indeed somebody, and that we don't have to be dependent. We don't have to let no man take away our cojones. Ain't nobody castrating me. Ain't nobody going to socially, morally, ain't nobody going to education, spiritually castrate me. Ain't nobody taking my stuff from me. Ain't nobody taking my junk. Ain't nobody going to take my junk and give me a welfare card. Ain't nobody taking my junk. Ain't nobody taking my junk. And got these women too, giving up theirs. Obama. Now they're selling the churches. There's a preacher across town, and he'd been talking ill against me. I've been telling God's gonna kill all these preachers that sold these churches, but this particular preacher had been talking ill against me here in Harlem. God killed him the other day. Thank God he's dead. And we'll kill some more of them. I'm the Lord's servant, I tell you. I tell you, I'm the Lord's servant. Good God Almighty. I said, I'm the Lord's servant. You'd better off fighting David, the son of Jesse, than even dreaming about laying a hand on me. I said, I'm the Lord's servant. You'd get away with a whole lot more with David than you could with me. I'm the Lord's servant. I'm the Lord's servant. And we're going to stop what Obama has done, Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, all the rest of them. No. We're going to resurrect the spirit of independence and power and honor before God. That's right. Pray for me. This is a bit of a news blog we do, looking at spiritual wickedness in high places for the most part, making some observations about it and giving people a biblical foundation to the way of interpreting, rather than have Sean Hannity or Laura Ingraham or Janine Pirro or Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow or Don Lemon, Rush Limbaugh interpret what's going on in the world. You come to me and I'll tell you based on what the Word of God says. They'll just give you their worldly, sinful view. But the Manning Report will tell you what God has said, whether to say yea or nay, whether to go or to stay. You'll be led by the word of Almighty God. Come to the Manning Report on a daily basis to interpret the spiritual wickedness in high places, because there's plenty of it that's going on. And so I'm the Lord's servant, James David Righteous Rebel Manning, and I'm here to serve you with news and information.